Welcome back to another episode of the Even Your Dynasty show. On today's video, we are going to talk Roki Sasaki and the Giants' pursuit of him this offseason. He just got posted about a week ago. We haven't really discussed him at any kind of significant length in recent videos. We have mentioned him a few times on the live shows, but I want to kind of dive a little deeper on who he is, his kind of his pitch mix, his background, the cost and just the fit overall. So, starting off with who he is, he's 23 years old. He just turned 23 back at the beginning of November. So, this coming season, he's going to be pitching in his age 23 season for the entire season. Now for contract, because he's under, I think it's like under 25, he can only sign for the major league, we'll call it the rookie salary or the rookie deal, which is the 3 pre-arbitration years and 3 arbitration years. So you're going to have him from age 23 to 28. I mean, this is exactly what Shohei Ohtani did, basically, where when he signed with the Angels, he had the 3 super cheap pre-arbitration years where he's making, $800,000 a year, $900,000 a year, and then he becomes arbitration eligible. And if he's as good as you hope, he's going to get expensive, at the very end of that, at least. Your first arbitration year is usually not terribly expensive, but he would probably get more expensive at the back end of that deal. So, I mean, from a cost perspective, it's a phenomenal deal, especially when you're thinking about getting one of the, potentially one of the best pitchers in baseball if you do land this guy. Now, obviously, he hasn't proven it at the major league level yet, but this is all just kind of projections with him. Um, Background as far as what he's done, he's got a career 2.02 ERA in Japan, a sub 1 whip. He threw a perfect game last season, which was only the 16th in the history of the Japanese professional league. He also followed that, and he had 19 strikeouts in that game. He followed that perfect game by throwing 8 more perfect innings. Apparently, he retired 52 consecutive batters at one point, which was also a record, and he struck out 14 in that following outing. In his last 3 years in Japan, he struck out over 12 per 9. He never walked more than 2 per 9. So this isn't a guy that has like super poor command and walks a ton of guys. He has absolutely electric stuff, which now if we want to start talking about like how good his stuff is, he's got a 70 grade fastball that gets well over, and it might even be higher than that depending on the scout you talk to. His fastball averaged 98.8 miles per hour. It touched as high as 102 in the past. His splitter might be his best pitch, which garnered an absurd like 54% swing and miss rate on his splitter last season. It's gotten as high as it looks like 91.8, but it runs a lot in the 88 to 90 mile per hour range. So I mean, he has 2 truly elite pitches, and then he also throws a slider, which is only above average. So 3 pitch guy. The one concern I have with him, and this, he's a young pitcher, so I say concern, but his highest career innings was 129 in Japan. Last season, he threw 111. It's not a guy that you're going to be able to just like throw in there like a Corbin Burns and be like, okay, this guy's going to give me 190 innings. It's probably not going to happen right away. It's going to take time, and this guy's going to need an opportunity to build his arm up as time goes on. But for the cost that you would get him at, I mean, this is possibly the best bang for your buck in all of Major League Baseball going into next season. And really the following 3 years, it might be. Because, aside from that, all you have to do is pay a posting fee, which for those of you wondering, for MLB rules, if the contract or the guaranteed value is less than $25 million, the release fee is 20% of the total guaranteed contract. So you're going to have to pay him your international bonus pool based on his posting. He could sign anytime in a 45-day window from when he was posted. And it doesn't make sense for him financially to sign prior to January 15th. Now he might have an agreement in place. We might know where he's going before then. I mean, that's entirely possible, but it doesn't make financial sense for him to sign before that, because on January 15th, teams will have access to their full 2025 international signing bonus pool. And if he signs prior to that, they only have access to what's left from their 2024 pool, which most teams have wiped out most of that pool. I think like the Giants had, a little over $1 million left, and then they just signed a guy for like $500,000 in the last week. So, they're kind of limited to $1 million-ish or so. Next season, though, they have 5.1. Now it's down to 5.1. It's one of the lowest totals in baseball because they lost $1 million total signing Blake Snell and Matt Chapman last offseason, since both guys had qualifying offers attached to them. So looking at this coming season, they have, or 2025 international bonus pool, they have $5.1 million available. Now, as it currently stands, I brought up cost, and from a financial standpoint, the cost isn't significant. You're looking at really just the 5.1 million bonus, and you're going to be looking at a pre-arb contract for 3 years, and then, arbitration contract for the following 3 years. So all told, the total that you might spend is like 50 million bucks or 60 million, depending on just how elite he is. On those last couple of years of arbitration. But from a overall cost standpoint, it is going to be a little bit significant. And I say this because if you do sign him, you are very likely going to have to withdraw your agreements with guys like Hoswar Gonzalez and um, Gene Macaris, and there's one other guy. He's a Venezuelan shortstop, and I'm drawing a blank on his name. I think it was like Julian Beretta or something like that. But you are going to have to withdraw those. Now, Gonzalez, I guess technically Roki is now the number one international prospect, but he's 23 and all these other guys are 16. So if you remove Roki from the situation going into this coming, international signing period, Hoswar Gonzalez was ranked number one, and Gene Macaris was ranked number 24. He's an outfielder from Aruba. These are, especially Gonzalez, he's a switch hitting shortstop that should stick at shortstop and grades out to have potentially be a true 5-tool player. Now, he's 16. I am not in any way saying I wouldn't take Sasaki and just chance it and go, okay, fine, let this guy go. But I will say this, and I said it on the last live show, if you do sign Sasaki and you lose Gonzalez, and Gonzalez does turn into a superstar, a switch hitting superstar shortstop that's a 5-tool player, it's going to hurt me to my soul a little bit, because the Giants haven't had a prospect with that kind of tool package possibly in my lifetime. It has been that long since they have had a guy that has been a genuine 5-tool prospect. Now he could just end up being terrible. Like, we don't know. Like, he's 16. So he just might not end up being anything close to what you hope. So you absolutely do take Sasaki in that situation. But it is a it is a cost that you're going to lose him and Macaris, like a really good prospect haul, because it's going to damage what your farm system could potentially be in very short order. So there is cost beyond the financials, and I'm not saying I'm not willing to absorb that or anything like that. I think you absolutely roll with the guy that has the potential to be one of the best pitchers in baseball, especially because the pathway to beating the Dodgers is probably through your rotation. Like, you're going to have to build a dominant pitching staff, both in the starting rotation and in the bullpen. You're going to need to find a way to limit their run production in the short series in the playoffs if you want any chance at beating them in a short series. So you absolutely make that move, especially if you can get him and somehow you do still land a Corbin Burns. All of a sudden you have a 3-headed monster that you could just throw out there and say, hey, games 1, 2, and 3, like, we're gonna throw our best, and then you might get a break in game 4 against Robbie Ray, but then guess what? Games 5, 6, 7, you're gonna get these 3. So you have a chance in that kind of series. Not to say they wouldn't still have other needs, but you'd have a chance. And especially if you don't land Burns, Sasaki would be like the best consolation prize because realistically, he might be better for that life of the deal than Burns is. Burns is just probably a safer bet just because you know kind of what you're getting. He has a long track record. Sasaki, there is some projection. I mean, this is a guy that hasn't thrown a ton of innings and he's been on the international stage before. He had about a 3.5 ERA in the World Baseball Classic as a 22-year-old going or 21-year-old in 2022. So this a little bit of what you're getting out of Sasaki, but it's still a projection when you're talking about him making his debut in the major leagues. We saw with Yamamoto, who I think wasn't quite as good and as dominant as people expected in his first year. But then you look down at the end of the year and he had like a 3 ERA. He was really, really good. He was a really, really productive pitcher. Got knocked around in his first start in the playoffs, then bounced back and threw the ball really well the rest of the way. So these guys, there's going to be an adjustment period and there's always a risk. We've seen it with some of the pitchers that came over from Japan that didn't, meet expectations, looking at like Daisuke Matsuzaka and Masahiro Tanaka was good for a short period of time, then kind of fell off. But last year, guys like Shota Imanaga was much better than expected. So you really don't know what you're going to get out of these guys when they first come over. And once the league kind of adjusts to them because they've seen them a little bit, you don't know what you're going to really get out of them, beyond that. So there is risk involved. I'm not going to say he's like a perfect prospect or anything like that, but it's definitely something that the Giants should do everything they can to try and sign him. But the reality is there are 30 teams in Major League Baseball, and all 30 teams are going to pursue this guy. Now, how many of them really have a shot at him? I don't know. There are a lot of different reports out there on what he is, potentially looking for. And I do think the reality is nobody truly knows what he's going to be looking for. There have been reports that he might want to go to a smaller market and have kind of a, quote, soft landing to where he doesn't have quite the pressure on him. He can just show up, be an ace, and do his thing and not be under intense scrutiny of a team or of a market like New York or LA. A lot of people think that it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to go to the Dodgers. I don't personally believe that because I think a lot of what he's going to do or where he's going to go is going to be where he can maximize things like endorsements and sponsorships and all that. And is he going to really be able to do that for the Dodgers playing in Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto's, shadow? Like, is he going to be able to do that in LA? I don't think so. I think he would get much more if he went and played for a Chicago Cubs or a Boston Red Sox or the Giants or, even the New York teams. Like, it's just, there are other markets where he could probably make more money than he would for the Dodgers. And it's really just because the Dodgers have these other two superstar Japanese players already on their team. So it does limit his, his, what do you want to call it? Earnings ceiling in LA if he goes there. Even San Diego makes sense for him. A good fit, especially already kind of ready-made team. He can go there, be the ace. That would be a strong location for him to choose to pitch. So it's hard to know what he wants. Now, I would love to see, I think part of the pitch and part of the draw for San Francisco, obviously we've talked about the Buster Posey effect. He's already kind of selling people on the future for the Giants. The park would be one of the best to play in. It is on the West Coast, which does matter to some of these players coming from Japan. They've mentioned it as a preferred destination before. That doesn't guarantee anything for the Giants, but because they do have direct flights to Japan and things like that. So there are some benefits to them being on the West Coast. But I think there's one draw that gets kind of overlooked, and this would be a draw for both pitching for the Giants or the Padres. A lot of these guys have been kind of going the front runner route, going to the Dodgers and just hopping on the bandwagon, You got it nice and easy. You get to go pitch, and you've got 3 MVPs in a stacked lineup that's going to probably put up a bunch of runs for you every start. Takes a ton of pressure off of you. Yada yada. There's all these good reasons to go to the Dodgers, but I do see. I see a reason to be that should be a bigger reason to go to, whether it's the Padres or the Giants, but like one of those division rival teams, because there used to be this thing that like people wanted to compete against the best. And how could what better way to tell the world, like, I'm one of the best pitchers on this planet than to go shove the Dodgers around 4 times a year in the regular season plus in the playoffs? If you go pitch for a division rival where you can go face them, depending on your turn in the rotation, all that, but you might potentially face them 4 times in the regular season. And if you go out there and you dominate that lineup 4 times a year in the regular season, and if you make the playoffs, you dominate them in the playoffs, like that by itself, obviously you still got to perform the rest of the year. You can't just only show up for 4 starts a year, but that by itself kind of sends a message, and people remember that kind of stuff. When you get to the end of your career and you go, oh yeah, there was that dominant Dodgers team, and then except for when they faced Roki Sasaki, or I mean Blake Snell had a bit of that reputation for a while, where he had a dominant career against LA. But it's like you can kind of separate yourself from all the other great pitchers around baseball if you're in like the same division as that team and you constantly just bully them every time you face them, and you see 3 MVPs and you just mow them down. That's the kind of stuff that that gets you talked about amongst all timers. If you do post like a great career and then you have things like that on your resume, that's how you get talked about amongst the all-time greats. So I would love to see him come here. I wouldn't necessarily love to see him go to San Diego, but I'd love to see him go there more than I'd love to see him go to LA. That's for sure. Um, but it's just, to me, like that. I wish baseball would get back, and a lot of these guys would get back to, wanting to compete against the best. And I think that would be a really strong opportunity, and it should be a strong draw for him to play for either of those two organizations. So does he come to the Giants? I mean, I think the odds are obviously stacked against the Giants signing Sasaki, but it does feel like this is the guy that Posey wants the most. Um, obviously it's not as simple as a Burns where it's just going to be, probably have the biggest offer, and it seems like he already has a draw coming back. Sasaki, everybody has to offer the same thing except for very minuscule differences with bonus pools. Or with their signing bonus, coming from their international pools, depending on what they have available. But, um, you know, if you could get him, like, it would be pretty incredible. That's all. That's all I can really say about that. So, as always, I appreciate everybody. If you do enjoy the content, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. We cleared over 1,200 subscribers like last week, which is amazing. You guys rock. You're awesome. We'll be back to live shows on Friday. Unless we get a Corbin Burns signing in the next couple days, maybe we'll be able to do something earlier. But that seems to be dragging. Typical Boris stuff. We'll probably talk more about Scott Boris and them dragging this thing on. And is it inevitable, or is it just kind of, is there still a lot of fear on whether or not the Giants can get this deal done? We'll dive in on that a different day if this is still dragging by then. But other than that, I'll probably put out at least one more video between now and Friday. So keep your eyes open for that. Appreciate you guys. Go Giants, and we'll catch you next time.